There are a lot of parents who don't even see or feel the need to pass on their mother
So I
tongue.
find this whole question a little funny about why the mother tongue, because mother, how important the mother is.
Welcome to the third episode of the Eternal Musings. I'm here again with my Amma, and we had two great productive discussions on what is good parenting in our first two episodes. And I'm glad that we've been able to engage an audience. Of course, it's a small audience for now, but I'm hoping that it'll grow over time and we're able to um, touch on topics that are relevant and relatable to the audience that we're talking to. How are you enjoying these discussions?
I'm loving it, especially because it's so cold outside, it's freezing, we can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So, a good time to sit and talk, right? So, I'm loving it.
Yeah, I'm also glad that we started this on the New Year's Day. So it's all been cold day podcast since then. But we can get right into our topic. So today's topic is on knowing our mother tongue and the importance of knowing our mother tongue. So it's sort of related to the first two episodes as well, regarding good parenting. So, but I think it deserved its own episode, and I know someone mentioned that this is a good topic to touch on. So
Yes, but people did ask me, are you going to be speaking about problems with mother tongue in the Indian diaspora? So I said, sure.
Yeah. But we can start off with what is mother tongue even. And the reason why I wanted to start off with that is growing up, I was confused about what that even meant because I grew up in a household where there were multiple languages spoken all around me. So your mother tongue is Kannada. So my mom, Amma's, your mother tongue is Kannada. And then my dad's mother tongue is Hindi. And so growing up, like as soon as I was born, the birth language or the mother tongues that I heard around me were Kannada and Hindi. And there was also English because you and my appa, both of you speak in English and Hindi with each other, of course. So all of those are my mother tongues, basically. It's not like there's a mother's tongue and there's a father's tongue. I always thought, okay, there's a mother tongue, it means that's what your mother speaks. So is there a father's tongue as well, which is what your dad speaks? But that's not the case. Both there's just this term that refers to all the languages you hear when you're born. So your birth language is your mother tongue. So yeah, that was my experience with these multiple mother tongues. What about you?
No, for me it's easy because I come from a Kannada speaking family, so both Appa and Amma used to speak to me in Kannada. And but then I was brought up in Delhi and Kolkata. So in the early years when I was in Delhi, people around me were speaking in Hindi, whereas at home we were speaking in Kannada. So there was a little bit of a disconnect because I would have certain words that I would use for, say, a dog and a cat and things like that. And then when I would go out, I would use those very words, and then some people would make fun of me and say, "What are you talking about? Like, dog is nai, right?" And I would say, if I saw a dog on the street, I would say nai, and then I would hear some auntie saying, "Nai kya hota hai? इसको कुत्ता है ये नाई थोड़ी है." And then so they didn't, so those kind of things. Then I would say kutta, and then at home when I would go back, Amma would say again, she would correct me. So these things happened, and then going to school, it was in English. So there was this little bit of a disconnect. And when we moved to Kolkata, I was about 9 years old. So there was Bengali being spoken all around me. But the good thing was that at home, Amma and Appa were speaking in Kannada, and my sister also, when she came, we were all speaking in Kannada. But I didn't know how to read and write in Kannada. So spoken language, the mother tongue was Kannada. And in Calcutta, we had Bengali as the third language, Hindi as the second language. So English, Hindi, and Bengali are the languages I know how to read and write. But the spoken language, which is the mother tongue, is Kannada. So even I have a number of gaps in my mother tongue understanding, or because I don't know how to read and write.
So you knew and learned how to read and write Bengali and Hindi because it was taught to you in school.
That's right. And Appa and Amma thought that, oh, she's already learning 3 languages, so why, it's not necessary to know how to read and write in Kannada. So that was a mistake they made. And then in the summer holidays, sometimes they would tell me, okay, try learning, and they would teach me, and I would forget it all by the time it's over because it's not being used, right? Reading and writing was not being used. Whereas spoken, yes, I was speaking in Kannada.
Was there no third language option for you in your school in Kolkata?
No, that was Bengali. The first was English,
Oh, Hindi, and
second
then
was
Bengali.
Hindi, and third was Bengali.
And everyone had to take Bengali, or were there options for other regional
Oh, they would
languages?
take Hindi. So the Bengali speaking people
would take
Bengali as the second language and Hindi as a third language.
So only Bengali and Hindi were offered.
Yes, and that school, that's the way it was. And nowadays, I think they've expanded it more, and I believe they even have French and all those things, German and all that. So that was my situation.
So you were only exposed to Kannada at home.
Yes.
So you didn't get any of that outside in general?
When we visited Bangalore in the summer holidays, Bengaluru, Mysuru, that's when Nanjangud, cousins and all would be speaking in Kannada. So it was always the spoken language, which is good too, because some people don't get even that.
But what about English? When was that introduced to you?
So English was the medium of instructions. I went to English medium schools all my life. So the way all the other subjects were taught to me was through English. So English was studied as a language, and English was the medium of instruction. And Hindi and Bengali were just languages at different levels. So third language is at a much simpler level. We don't go into the depth of that language. We just learn very simple things. And second language is a little more complex. So that was what I got exposed to.
In my case, I went through, I think it's called language attrition now, with Kannada. So obviously, you know that I grew up, I was exposed to Kannada so early on. I heard it being spoken all around me. And then at some point, what ended up happening is English was introduced into my life. And then the environment changed in such a way that you also started speaking to me in English. And what that led to was language attrition, where you're losing the first tongue that you learned, or your proficiency in that language has gone away. So it's possible for you to forget the first tongue you've learned, because now this new language has been superimposed on your memory of that language. And so that's what actually ended up happening to me with Kannada. So Kannada is still part of my subconscious, but what has happened is that it's a thing where I'm able to recognize sentences. I'm able to understand the language very well even now. But as soon as I in my head, I know what I want to say. And if someone says that in Kannada, I'd be able to recognize that. I understood what you said. And if it's a multiple choice question, I would have picked that as the answer. But there's a problem with recall. So now if you tell me to come up with that sentence on my own, I won't be able to do that. I always feel like it's at the tip of my tongue, but I don't know what to say. So there has been forgetting of Kannada that has happened to me. So my question to you is, what ended up happening there? Why did you start speaking to me in English that made me forget?
It's all because we were in Singapore and you were going to this play school, and I found that you were picking up the Singlish, that combination of Chinese and English, that kind of, it's called Singlish, just like we have English in India, Hindi and English combination. So you were picking up Singlish instead of proper English. So until you went to play school, I was speaking to you completely in Kannada. Then when you came back from the play school speaking and you had picked up this English, so I had to tell you that that's not correct English and this is how you speak. So I started speaking to you in English until you got the English right, until you started pronouncing the words correctly. And then I went back to Kannada, but by then you had it had got hardwired into you, and then you would not respond to me in Kannada. Even if I spoke to you in Kannada, you would understand everything, but you would reply to me in English. And I think you were a little mule-headed about it. I tried to explain to you, look, this language, we have to preserve this language. That's why I'm speaking to you in Kannada. But you would just listen to it, go play, come back again, and you would only be talking in English. So I would say you were a little stubborn when I tried to reintroduce Kannada back, at least a spoken Kannada. So that was a problem. But Hindi, I think we did better with Hindi with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So something did go wrong in a way for me. For this could be deemed a failure. I don't know if it's all you or all me. I know I would say that it's partly your fault that you allowed English to be spoken at home at an age when I was already grasping Kannada so well. And I know you'll say that it's kind of my fault because I lost the willpower. I wasn't taking initiative in learning Kannada once I lost that ability to speak in that language. So we will just agree to disagree there. But I think it's both our faults in a way.
No, but maybe if the English that you had picked up was right and you were speaking the right English, then I would have continued with Kannada. So it was a bit of the circumstances of that time. But I tried to correct that by making you learn Hindi at least.
We Hindi is something that was introduced to me in DPS International School.
So we put you in DPS.
So as for context, DPS is one of the 2 Indian international schools. I think there are some more that have come up, but it was one of the original 2 Indian international schools in Singapore where they were teaching the Indian board. The board that you have in India is being taught in a franchise.
You had ICSE, right?
I had ICSE. The other one had CBSE. So I think you put me in this one because it was ICSE, and you wanted me to have ICSE for some reason.
Because I studied in ICSE.
Because I think you said that it has like a English literature and language that is more emphasized.
Language was better in higher standard.
Higher standards.
But of course, if you had gone to the Singapore schools, not an international school, you would have learned better Hindi, I guess.
So you put me in this school, so that allowed me to learn Hindi again, read and write in Hindi, Devanagari script, and reading different literature as well. So I got exposed to some Chanda Mama comics as well through our textbooks. So that was there. That Hindi is something that at least I was able to formally learn and engage with. Of course, I would say I'm fluent in it in that I'm completely, I'm adept in the grammatical and vocabulary of Hindi. Like I can recognize it, I can recall, I can speak in it. There's just practice that is missing in my.
And you can understand Hindi movies, right? We watch all the movies, you don't need subtitles. You totally get all the nuances as well.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Of course, the Shuddha Hindi, if that's being spoken, there will be, sometimes I'm going to get a little bit confused because I don't hear that Shuddha Hindi being spoken around me anyway. So it just needs practice. I feel like with both Hindi and Kannada a little bit more, I need like more exposure to really be able to recall and say things the way I was probably growing up. But the question here is like, what is the loss of me not knowing Kannada, right? Because what we're seeing is these days there are a lot of parents. I know you had a good intention. You wanted me to learn Kannada. Okay, something went wrong. At least I know Hindi really well. Now that I have an interest, I might go back to Kannada and start learning because I now understand the importance of learning my mother tongue. So I think you were well-intentioned, but there are a lot of parents who don't even see or feel the need to pass on their mother tongue to their children because they think, okay, to get a job, all you need to know is English. English is the language of the world order and the economy. So they do everything to make sure their child can learn English, and that's all they need. So why is it so important for us to know our mother tongue in general?
So I think one of the main reasons is the cognitive development of the child. So if the child learns the mother tongue at a young age, and then and so at whatever cognition is faster in the mother tongue. So the neural networks that are formed that helps understanding better because that's a language the child has heard in the mother's womb, and now that's a language being spoken to the child. So the child is comprehending the world through that language, and so cognition improves when mother tongue is used at an early age, and the child becomes adept in that language. So cognition, right? Understanding the world, understanding concepts, and then the second thing is the emotional development and the social development. That also becomes stronger when the mother tongue is used with the child. Obviously bonding, right? So the bonding with other people improves because the child is now well ensconced in the mother tongue. The social development also improves because otherwise there is this confusion. If the child is not doesn't know the mother tongue and is also trying to learn other languages, then there's a bit of a confusion and there might be awkwardness in the social world, making relationships. So social development and emotional development get improved when the child is able to understand the mother tongue and communicate in the mother tongue. And then sometimes I find this whole question a little funny about why the mother tongue, because mother, you know how important the mother is. So just like that, mother tongue is also like the mother, right? It's the language, it's your mother, and like the motherland as well. Yeah. So it shouldn't need any explanation about why you need the mother tongue. It is your mother, so you should know your mother. It gives you that warmth, it embraces you, and it forms your worldview. It creates, it's that initial stage of your life when you need your mother. So you do need the mother tongue for developing as an individual who is a contributing member of society.
Yeah, what I've noticed is that Singapore has done a really good job of ensuring that the mother tongues of the local population are taught in schools. So they've did a good job of understanding what are all the languages spoken in the local population, like Tamil, Malay, Mandarin, and of course English and maybe some others. But they're all introduced as part of the local system as your second or third language. So if I didn't obviously study in the Singapore system, but even if I did, I wouldn't have lost out in any way because Hindi would still have been introduced to me. So it's not like the Indian education system is what allowed me to learn Hindi. The Singapore local system would have also ensured that I learned Hindi. But what I noticed when I came to the US is that obviously I was part of the AP system, the Advanced Placement System, which is the American Board of Education in other parts of the world. Like in UK, it's the IGCSE IB system. In India, it's ICSE. So in advanced placement, in my high school specifically, only Spanish was offered as the second language, or was it third language? Second language. And even Mandarin was offered. But there were no other languages offered outside of that. Maybe French, Spanish, Mandarin. And then also we have to take advanced placement standardized tests. And those tests had one for Chinese, Mandarin, had one for Spanish, and of course English. But I never saw one for Hindi. So this is like where everyone is tested around the country. So I don't know if other high schools in the US were teaching Hindi, but I know for sure that there's no standardized AP exam that high schoolers take across the country with where Hindi is being offered. So it is possible that this is because the Chinese wave of immigration occurred prior to maybe the Indian wave. I would say the Indian wave was around 1970s, 1980s, so maybe we're a little bit behind. But I did do a Google search and I saw a lot of Reddit and Quora discussions on, why is Hindi not being offered in the AP? So I think change is going to come in the future. But if I was studying in the US instead of Singapore, it's possible that I wouldn't have even learned how to read and write Hindi. And I've noticed that with a lot of friends who speak Hindi at home around me in the US, they don't know how to read and write Hindi because, again, not introduced in the education system. And in your case, you learned how to read and write the languages that you ended up studying in your education system. And the ones you don't know how to read and write is the one that you learned at home.
Right.
So very similar.
Right. Yeah. So I think the Indian American children who don't know how to read and write in Devanagari, they are probably reading everything in English, in the English script, right? If they even if they learn any shlokas and all, they read it in the English script.
Yeah. But I think I see that as something that sets me apart a little bit from the other people of my age, in that I'm able to read and write and Hindi, and I understand the Devanagari script and I can read the shlokas. Not bragging, but I'm just saying that it's something I didn't think it's something that no one knew around me, but it is something in my circle I've realized that I know.
That's great. So that was something I got right.
You got right.
Even though I failed in teaching you Kannada.
Okay, yes. Maybe I'll go back to Kannada. I'm also trying to learn Hindi, like speaking Hindi better as well. Like I said, I need more practice. So I know we started watching Upanishad Ganga. Is that what that's?
Yeah.
Upanishad Ganga.
Right.
Yeah. So the more you told me that there's someone you knew who didn't know Hindi that well, and then she watched all the Chanakya episodes, and then she
that's
and then she learned.
But actually, even your Hindi also came from watching a lot of ZTV in Singapore.
Oh God!
You used to
the
watch
Saas
movies.
Serials.
So not just Saas Bahu serials. You also watched those movies. Hindi movies started in Singapore itself. So I was using movies a lot to make you learn Hindi as well as know about India. But yeah, what I don't like is that the way the language is spoken in India, any language, is that a lot of English is mixed with it. So nobody really speaks good Hindi, nor good Kannada, nor good anything, because English is all mixed into it. And so it doesn't sound good to me. Even when I go to give talks in English, I'm told that I should mix Hindi into it. So then I don't feel very comfortable mixing the two languages, because I feel you're not doing justice to either of the languages. Yes. Even I want to improve my Hindi. I can speak in Hindi, but I mess up with the ling because I'm essentially a South Indian. So all this, is it the male gender or the female gender, masculine or feminine? I mess up
The ling is something I still don't get. I
And
think
your
it's
appa is teasing me all the time when I'm getting the gender wrong. So then that's what
and then he
makes
just
me...
happens to know which gender is what. There's no logic
Yeah,
to
there's
it.
no logic, and he says it just comes from knowing, and so he's not able to explain to me.
But you said Sanskrit doesn't have
Sanskrit has gender as well. Sanskrit has.
But there's some logic to the gender.
No, even there it's you have to know. You have to know. So
you have to know.
You have to know what gender it is. So
I did attend a few Sanskrit classes with you. I didn't think that was the case.
No, that is
it was like if it ends with a or ends, then it's
yeah. That there are those things, but there will be exceptions to every rule. So that is the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, I think, it's funny how English is the only, one of the few languages that doesn't have that, where the...
In that sense, it's easy. English is
that
easy.
Makes it easier.
Yeah.
Of course, there are other illogical aspects of English, the silent letters and languages.
That is a big issue, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, every language has their own level of, I guess, what do you call it? The parts that don't make sense, illogical.
Except Sanskrit, actually. Sanskrit is one of the most perfect languages ever.
Of course. So I remember I was talking about the second and third languages with you, and then you mentioned that there's a difference between languages that are introduced as second or third languages versus it being taught as a medium of instruction in general. So can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so that is something that is very irksome because English was a language that was imposed on India, right? So we were all in India having our own languages, and then education was in that language. So different states of India were studying the children were studying in their language. Everything, all subjects were being taught in that language: astronomy, mathematics, accounting, all that was being taught. Then came when the British began to gain control of more and more territory in India, and they wanted more people. They wanted clerks. They wanted people in the army, right? And they wanted loyalty from the people of India, and that's why they decided to change the entire education system of India and impose the English language. So there was a very well thought out, it was a lot of discussions took place. 15 years they discussed, and then finally they said that we are going to only fund English medium schools and colleges, because they were collecting a lot of taxes from India, and they realized that they have so they need to fund the education, otherwise people are, because this was a very literate society that they were ruling over, and so they changed the language of instruction. So now we were not studying English as a language, but we were being instructed in English. So that's how it caused a big chaotic environment in India. It just disrupted so many things. The native schools, the indigenous language schools were all shut down because they didn't have funding, and English medium became the norm, and then it created a kind of apartheid in society, because now the English medium educated people are getting the jobs that the British government in India, the jobs that they were giving to people were requiring people to speak in English so that they would understand them. There was also the convenience aspect. The British didn't want to learn Indian languages in big numbers, so they wanted the natives to speak to them in English. So that's how when the medium of instruction became English, it caused a lot of problems in India, and till today it is causing problems, right?
And in other countries as well. You mentioned that.
Oh yes, it is. It has been found that among the top 20 countries, the richest countries in the world, if you see the medium of instruction, it's the same language that everybody is speaking over there. So the medium of instruction is the same as everybody. Like Russian. In Russia, they'll be taught in Russian. In Japan, they'll be taught in Japanese. In China, they'll be taught in Chinese.
There's never any English. I mean, English is probably offered.
English is just taught as a language. So you learn a language. How you learn a language.
And the ones that have been colonized, that's
the colonized countries. If you see the poorest countries in the world, they're mostly all colonized and mostly all studying in English. So that's, you see, so English is not correlated with your economic grading or your economic development. But there is this mistaken notion that if you don't know English, then you cannot be a part of the international world. That's not true, because if you look at all these Japanese and the Chinese, they're doing well without having been instructed in English in schools. Germans are doing well. And today papers can be translated. So a paper is written in Chinese, it can be translated to English. The tools are getting better,
and because they're learning in their mother tongue, technically in those countries like Russian and Japanese and Chinese, I mean, does that mean they're performing better in jobs?
I think so, because what I have heard is that even if you take the best programmers in the world, the top coders, right? So like the Russians and the Chinese and all these, the Polish people, they are learning how to do the coding in their own mother tongue, and they're the best coders in the world. Whereas in Indians, they are learning everything in English. They are not at the top, and you could say that it's because the mother tongue is not being used to teach them that.
There's like studies on this, or is there?
Yeah, there are studies on this. So there are studies that show that if you're studying in your mother tongue, it does help you. It helps you to learn other languages as well. Once you're very well rooted in your own language, it also helps you to learn other languages better.
Yeah, there's this concept of linguistic relativity, which I learned in psychology, and it's also called the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. And it talks about how your perception of the world is determined by the language that you speak. So you're limited by the words of that language. So an example is a TED Talk that I had watched a couple of years ago, like in 2018, and I forgot the name of the person, Lera Boroditsky, but I'll put it in the description for if anyone wants to watch it. In that, she talks about how so in other languages, there's a gender for a lot of nouns. We were just talking about it, right? So German and Spanish, they have a gender for some nouns, the grammatical gender. So in German, so for the word bridge, the word bridge is grammatically feminine in the German language, and it's grammatically masculine in Spanish. And so I think she interviewed speakers of that language to see how they would describe a bridge. And the German speakers would describe the bridge as elegant and beautiful, using stereotypically feminine vocabulary and adjectives to describe the bridge, because it's determined by the fact that bridge is feminine in their language. Whereas in Spanish, the Spanish speakers were describing the bridge as strong and long. Again, that's associated with stereotypically masculine traits.
Right.
So that's a good example of that. And I think I was also reading about the Eskimos and the Scandinavian languages, how they have like so many words in their vocabulary to for snow. So we just call snow, like falling snow on the ground. Everything is just snow to us. But they have a different word for falling snow that's turned to ice, slushy snow. All of that has its own term.
Wow.
It's unthinkable for them to find like this all-inclusive word for like called snow. And this is something that Whorf from the Sapir-Whorf, that's the two people, the duo that came up with this hypothesis. That's something the guy called Whorf noticed. So I'm wondering how English, the psychological impact of English, what it's had on India, basically.
Right. Like huge, exactly the same thing. So it's how you perceive the world. So one of the things is that in English, for example, there's just one word for, say, sun. If there's the word sun doesn't have any synonyms. If you look up water, it's just water. When I was editor of Asian Water, I would have to use the word water so many times in each article. At the most, I could say aqua. That's all you can do.
The elixir of life.
Elixir of life, that's it. But in Sanskrit, there are so many words for everything. The sun, the moon, water, earth. So many words. And each of those words describe a different attribute of that object. So, for example, sun, Surya, Bhaskara. Bhaskara means one who shines with his own light. Dinadipati, he's the lord of the day. Okay. Rutukarta, he's the one who creates seasons. So sun is now, if you say Rutukarta, means you're talking in terms of how he is the creator of seasons. Okay.
That does give you an idea of the science of that time as well.
The science as well. They're aware of the fact that the sun creates seasons. And things like the dispeller of darkness comes, destroyer of ignorance. All these words, the Surya has all these meanings. Aditya, son of Aditi. Similarly, water, so many words, right? Salila, pani. Pani indicates that it's something you drink, right? So the liquid that you drink, the liquid that moves. And it's therefore so every word has a range of meanings. Each word has so many meanings. So because of that, when you use any Indian language or if you use Sanskrit, there'll be more meanings to the world. so that you're looking at the world with more meanings, right? Instead of just saying water, the sun rises in the east, the sun sets in the west. But if you're using a different word for sun every time, Surya, Bhaskara, Aditya, you're giving different meanings to that very sun. And you're probably talking about some different quality about the sun.
It also makes you value the sun
that
more.
also makes
Now
you
you're
value the
understanding
sun.
that, oh yes,
That's another thing about
emphasis.
any Indian language, that or Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is the mother of all the Indian languages. And so when you learn any of these Indian languages, the way you perceive the world is through the framework that is found in our shastras, right? So that's a very all encompassing. It's a very integral unity of the world that we have in Sanatana Dharma, and that is coming in the language itself.
And so yeah, I do understand now that how it kind of influences the way we think about the world. If we have so many words to describe like so many attributes
Yes.
for one noun, like the sun and the jal. I remember in Hindi we would learn paryayvachi shabd, but it was never explained to us how.
Yes.
They never would tell us like, oh, Aditya means this attribute of the sun, and Ravi means this attribute of the sun. Surya is another attribute. Like, it was just say, oh, these are like the 10 ways to say sun. These are the 10 ways to say water, but or dharti, like the ground. So that it would just be told to us, but they would never actually explain what those attributes.
Yeah, that
were.
was very bad.
So I didn't know that while learning Hindi, but I knew all this. I would be like, oh, dharti. What else for zameen?
Again, dharti, the earth holds you, right? Dhara, it holds you. That's why you're saying dharti. So those meanings should have been explained. But anyway, if you at least know the language, then you will know that you will ask the question that why am I using this word instead of that word? And then somebody will tell you, or you will come to know on your own, right? So there are all this huge vocabulary. And Sanskrit also, you can generate more words. Because it has such a well-established grammar. It was one of the earliest languages which, or probably the earliest language which had such an advanced grammar, right? The grammar was so advanced that when the British discovered it in the 19th century, it revolutionized their understanding of languages. And that's how linguistics, the whole subject of modern linguistics, came up when William Jones and all these people discovered what Sanskrit was, right? How you can have an endless number of words generated by taking a root word and then adding suffix to it, and you can just have so many words.
You mentioned that there was a friend of yours whose name was actually created like this.
Yes, I think Vinisha told me
that's
that.
not actually a word.
Like it's probably not used, but she made that word. Her mother made that word, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm saying that in Sanskrit you can generate words, and the same thing can be done in the Indian languages as well, because they are all like descendants of Sanskrit, right? So that is how the whole framework, the way you look at the world. One thing about us is that we considered ourselves to be a part of nature, right? In the Sanskritic civilization, the Sanatana Dharma, we are all a part of nature. We don't think of ourselves as separate from nature. So that is reflected in the language itself. Everything will be like, it will not sound exploitative. It will be all like, the sun sounds like a friend, the moon is a friend, the earth is a friend. So the whole language, the whole way you look at the world is different.
Another thing I noticed is that in America, the way they have created new words is just they'll just come up with a new word, right? So like you can say that desk. So let's just imagine there's a desk, a study desk, right? Then there's also a table. If you think about it, those two are actually part of the same family of words. A table is where you sit at a table and you eat, and then a desk is also similar because you're sitting at a desk and you're working. But you would see that that those two terms are similar. Those two objects are similar. So I'm guessing in Sanskrit there'd be a way for both of them to either have the same, like they'd be connected. The word itself for both.
There'll be a logical
connection between objects from the same family.
Absolutely.
Whereas in English, it's like, oh, this is a table, that's a desk, and there's no connection that you can find.
Yeah, because they don't all, some of them do, but not many of them. The proper sequence where there's a root word and there's an addition to it, and then that new word is formed, right?
And that's something I noticed with my dad when we were moving into this house. when he was talking to the agent of this house, there was a table, there was a desk upstairs, and he said, we want this table to be moved out, because I think as Indians we just think all of that is like, all of the, like a desk is a table to us in a way. And so he just said, like, move the table, and she didn't actually get it, like, because she wanted you to say desk. If you said move the desk, she would have understood it, but because he said move the table, she didn't understand it, so she didn't move it.
It's also true that we don't get the nuances of the English language, perhaps sometimes.
Yeah, I actually seen this with Indians a lot. I'm not blaming them in any way. It's just the way that maybe we're so used to our Indian languages that we don't get those nuances as well. And so we think, okay, table is the same thing as a desk. Like we put a chair next to it and we work on it or we eat on it. So it's, why would you have to have a different term for everything? But I've noticed that with Americans, they will not understand you unless you use that right term.
Right.
So yeah, that's something I've noticed, and I've also noticed that Christian ideas make the foundation of the English language. Again, not blaming them. That's just the fact that
Judeo-Christian. The language will reflect the culture. Yeah.
Exactly. So even something I learned recently was that saying things like reading the writing on the wall, just these sayings that we just use all the time, or he's the apple of my eye, she's the apple of my eye. Even all those terms are all they all go back to the Bible. Like, you'll find them in the Bible. These are sayings, they're phrases that you'll find in the Bible that we're just using in the English language. Seeing eye to eye as well. So
there's also this, they use terms that are actually denigrated towards Indian languages. You could call them racist, because a lot of those terms, like there's holy cow. The holy cow is used a lot in English, which is derogatory towards Indians and Hindus, because it means something that's irrationally followed, which just doesn't have any logic to it, but you have to use it or do something, even though it's not rational. So so that is, they say holy cow. So I'm sure there are plenty of such expressions that they have, which indicate that they are the colonizers and they're looking down on these other cultures.
The kind of the Eurocentric worldview.
Eurocentric and Christian.
False gods is also something
false
that
gods,
is used.
Yes. False gods. Lot. Is it used? You see it being used, right? You said even in academia or some
I think I vaguely remember reading it somewhere. It was not being used to reference the Hindu religion, but it's just used to kind of bring out the fact that in that field there's something that you shouldn't be looking to, like that's a false god.
So see, that's why when you use the language of the colonizer, you're actually now insulting yourself by using terms like false gods. So and it's insulting towards even the indigenous faiths, the Native American culture as well.
Absolutely, right? Yeah. And another example is, it's not just the Christian values, but also the sayings that we have in English relate back to the history of the Western countries. I was looking up this term, cannery in the coal mine, that I read somewhere, and I noticed that it was from in 1911 in UK with coal miners using canneries. I don't know if it was used elsewhere in the world, but it's kind of using their history, and that's become the saying now for recognizing danger.
See, so when you're speaking in the mother tongue, the language of your country, your tradition, your culture, you're going to be using those phrases which reflect it. So I remember this dane dane pe likha hai khane wale ka naam, right? Yeah. It means, you know what it means.
Yeah, you've said that many times.
Yeah. So it means like, we say that suppose we were not planning something. We were not planning to eat somewhere, but we ended up eating there.
Yeah.
And then we say, but we have planned that we will eat at home, but now we are eating here. Then you'll see that the host will say, dane dane pe likha hai khane wale ka naam, right? Your name was written on this rice. So that's why you are eating here with us, right? So this is a very beautiful expression. Also, like हाथी के दांत खाने के और दिखाने के और होते हैं. So this is again showing you the culture. Elephants are found mainly in India and in Southeast Asia and this part of the world, and so it's reflected in the language. हाथी के दांत, the elephant has the two tusks in the front, but that is only for that's not the one it uses for eating. Okay. For eating, it has another set of teeth inside the mouth. That is the one it uses for eating. So दिखाने के लिए और खाने के लिए और. So it means when you use that expression, it means that there's more to a person than what you're seeing. You can't just judge him by what you're seeing externally. There is something else inside that has not been shown to you, that you're not aware of, right?
Yeah.
So these expressions will, all these proverbs, all these idioms that you use will be reflecting something in your culture.
Like dal mein kuch kala
Dal
hai.
mein
I
kuch
feel
kala
like that's
hai.
because we eat dal, so that's why we came up with this.
And then ghar ki murgi dal barabar,
Yeah.
right? All these are very evocative of our civilization. So that is why it is important to know the mother tongue, because you will also learn your own culture via that, and it will become important for your own authenticity, to become the real you, to find who you are really. I think knowing the mother tongue is what is going to help you to find the real you.
Right? Another example I thought of was the what's the phrase? Don't put the baby out of the don't throw the baby with the bathwater.
Don't throw the baby with the
Don't
bathwater.
throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
Again, that's not something Indians would relate to.
It would make no sense to us. We use it because
we don't
it's in
even
English.
use bathtubs.
Nobody
as
even
much.
knows what that means. Don't throw the baby with the bathwater. But there's a whole history, right? You know that.
I'm not too familiar with it.
It's about the baby which the people used to bathe in. Europeans used to bathe in a tub of water. And so that same tub of water would be used for different people to have bath, till the point that it became very dirty and black. And so suppose if there's a baby, you may not notice that baby is still in the bathtub, and you might throw the whole water out with the baby.
So the meaning is that you don't want to throw something good out with the bad.
Yeah, don't throw like an idea out, a concept out, in which you would be throwing out both the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Keep the good and
just take out the bad.
So in that sense, there are these expressions which are meaningless, but we are using them because meaningless to us in our culture.
Meaningless to us, but because we're speaking the colonizer's language, we have to use those expressions because that's how we'll be understood.
Correct.
Like they've set the rules, and we have to just.
You mentioned something about an essay you were writing, right?
Yes. So that was funny. I was actually writing an essay for my life science entrepreneurship class. That was my last assignment that we had to turn in, and there was when I was observing some trends with the venture capital space in the Alzheimer's, in that finding diagnostic solutions for Alzheimer's disease, I made an observation that is very Hindu. It's something that comes from our Hindu stories of during the Sagar Manthana. Shivji comes and drinks the poison and then becomes Nilkant. So the first thing that comes out from the Sagar Manthana is the poison, and he drinks it, right? And then everything good comes out of it later. But he has to drink it in order for the good to come out. So he has to kind of sacrifice himself
for the good
for the good to reach everyone else. So I was thinking about that as I was looking at the trends. So there's this Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation. What they do is that it's a philanthropic mission of trying to get pivotal funding for Alzheimer's, early stage Alzheimer's startups, Alzheimer's diagnostics and therapeutic startups. And what they do is that they invest in all of these startups very early on. So at least 50 or 60 of them might fail, and the rest of it might be promising. And no one wants to take that kind of risk, but this organization is taking that risk because it's funded by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all of these people who have made all their money, so they don't mind doing that. But my point being that I wanted to say that the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation is drinking the poison of the failures so that it can pave the way for other government agencies and pharmaceutical companies to take those promising candidates in the diagnostics and therapeutic space to market. So I wanted to use that, but I didn't know if it would be understood, and I couldn't find an equivalent saying in English that would touch on that observation. I found that in our Hindu stories. So I put down ADDF drank the poison of the failures, but I don't know if anyone understood that.
So that's a very good example of what happens when you are brought in a certain framework of thinking, and then the language you use is not allowing you to express that.
Yes.
Right? That's a very interesting
And then
example.
I expressed myself, but I don't know if it was understood. Yeah. But also it's nowadays what we've noticed is that karma, dharma, even mantra, all of these words are coming into the English language. They're being used. They're they found these terms and these concepts in our Indian culture.
Oh yeah, a whole lot of words.
And they've brought it in. Guru is also used so much, probably not in the
But most of them are not being used correctly. Most of them. Mantra especially, I just don't like to see that word being used lightly.
Yeah.
Mantra means something very, very deep in Indian languages. So we don't say, oh, this is the mantra, and it's just some flippant thing, and you're saying mantra. So I don't.
My mantra is to.
No, it wasn't. I am not very happy with those words.
My mantra is an apple a day keeps the doctor away.
Yeah, so I do use a lot of Sanskrit words, but I use them correctly.
Yeah.
And the others, when I see them using that, it's very light. It's used in a very light way, not in the profound way that it should be used.
They've taken these words with deep meanings and then they've kind of made them shallow.
Right.
Like they'll say, oh, the business gurus.
Right. Guru is not to be used. Like they should be saying business acharyas, but yeah.
Yeah, he was my entrepreneurship guru. And then they'll say, oh yeah, karma's a bitch.
Oh God, that.
Have my Kim Kardashian accent on, I guess. Yeah, so this is an interesting discussion on what proverbs and idioms we could be using, but now we're not able to use them because we're restricted by what's being offered to us in the English language, right? And actually that kind of takes me back to the point we were making earlier about children growing up not knowing their mother tongue and they're only able to speak English. But what we're also seeing that we have both observed in the Indian society is that there are these water lily children. They're known as water lily children in that they're not proficient in English and they're also not proficient in their mother tongue. And you touched on that earlier, but I want to actually give it a term. There's a term for it called water lily children. Mm-hmm. So like a water lily, the flower, right? It has one primary stem and multiple flowers that are loosely tied to that stem. So the theory basically discusses and explains how all those flowers are the additional languages that we are acquiring during our lifetime, and the primary stem and primary root that everything is connected to is our mother tongue. And so water lily children, they're just like floating around as water lilies, and that stem, that rootedness isn't strong in them, in their mother tongue. So that's why we would call them that. And I think this was used to reference the children who immigrated to Europe, I think in the 18th, 19th century, where their parents were speaking to them in limited English and limited understanding of their mother tongue. And so they were not proficient in any of the languages. And that's the same thing that we're also seeing in India right now, water lily children.
Is that a new expression though?
I saw it being used in 2 articles, but it's not that widespread. But I like the analogy, so I think it makes sense to bring it up. But there is, in that article that I read, it said that a Finnish linguist came up with this. Tova something. I forgot her name as well.
Yeah, so that means there are lots of water lily babies coming out of India.
Exactly.
Right? The Indian diaspora, you could say, right? Because they don't know their mother tongue, and they're also not very good in English. They're not very articulate. They're not very fluent, and they also probably don't have enough of public communication skills. They're not used to probably speaking in public, so that is also an issue. But yeah, this is a scourge, because this is when your language is not good, then your expression is not good. The thoughts that you express also will not be well formed. I feel when your language is not good, your thoughts will not be formed properly. Because you're not articulate. You see, and it's so important as a skill. Orators can simply sway everybody when you speak well, right? When you're able to express yourself well and touch the hearts of the other people, you actually exert a lot of power on them.
I see, yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's water lily babies are, I don't know what's your future going to be?
Yeah, I mean, it is quite pathetic. I don't know if I'm also a victim of that, knowing so many languages, and then English also introduced to me, so that there's that mix up and confusion that we all have in us.
Though a child should be able to learn many languages at a formative age. So the mother tongue along with 3-4 languages is very easy. I tell you, when you go back in history, you'll find a lot of people who knew like 15 languages, 20 languages. It was very common in those days, right? Even just like 50 years, 100 years ago, people knew a lot more languages. So it's just recently that this has happened, that people know. fewer and fewer languages. And when you lose a language, you also lose so much of knowledge, right? There is like the medicines. There is this has been documented that when a language dies, there are so many languages that have been lost, right? You actually lose things like, because they are naming everything around them in their own language, all the plants around them, and so they know what plants are toxic, what plants should not be touched, and what plants should be used for what purpose. So when that language dies, that knowledge dies. So I was reading somewhere that you are probably losing the next miracle drug because you have lost a language.
Yeah, it's quite pathetic that we've gone from that to like this degenerate way of speaking. Like when I hear them speaking Hindi, this weird Hindi English mix in a lot of the English educated population in India, where it's like they'll say something like us light ko turn on karo, like what's like that's all English, but there's some weird Hindi mixed in it as well. I mean, I'm also guilty of it. I feel like I'll use the English words and then I'll use the Hindi grammar.
Right. So in fact, when your father wanted to learn Kannada, so I had asked my little niece to teach him Kannada, and the way she was teaching him is idu table lo, idu fan lo, idu sofa, and I said, hey, you're speaking in English, you're not teaching him Kannada. But that's how she knew it.
Yeah. Is there any other example of what you've heard in India that you didn't particularly like?
Yeah,
the
like
way it was spoken?
the way like मेरी mother बीमार हो गई है.
Instead of मेरी माँ.
Yeah. That mother, father, brother, I don't know why they don't say these things in that language. In Hindi, it's very common in India. I hear that. मेरे brother चले गए थे वहाँ पे. मेरे father आने वाले हैं. Or they'll say father की death हो गई. That kind of Hindi. So I think I saw it. You were mentioning about Archies.
Yeah, I started watching Archies. I think you walked away in the middle of the movie. But yeah, I mean, it was based on an Anglo-Indian community, but I think it still reflects the society of, I mean, how you speak English and Hindi. And I know a lot of comments under the Archies said that sounded so weird, them speaking a mix of Hindi or English, but that's exactly what we observe and see in our society. So there's this like scene, you haven't seen it, but it's the showdown between the Betty and Veronica, so played by Khushi Kapoor and Suhana Khan. And then if I'm remembering the dialogue right, it was so pathetic. But she was just like, मेरे father सिर्फ books नहीं बेचते हैं. And then she was just like, मेरे father बच्चों के personalities को shape करते हैं.
Oh God.
And like you could actually use the word for personalities or shape.
But that's the way people speak. So it was reflecting reality.
Exactly. And then she says a little bit later, this is the worst, where she's like, लेकिन अपने father को देखो, जब आप अपने father के साथ बात करते हैं तो आपको secretary के through जाना पड़ता है.
Oh my God, even that word through.
Yeah. Maybe we'll play the Archie's dialogue. I might have butchered it.
मेरे father बस books नहीं बेचते, वो बच्चों की सोच को, उनकी पर्सनालिटीज को शेप करते हैं. He actually cares about them. और तुम्हारे फादर से बात करने के लिए तुम्हें भी उनके सेक्रेटरी के थ्रू जाना पड़ता है.
It sounds so pathetic. Maybe I might use it and I won't know it sounds so bad, but when you see other people using it,
so it's not just a diaspora problem. It's a
an
problem.
Indian problem as well.
Yeah.
Indian, like the English educated, city bred. The new Bollywood stars that are coming out, it's like they don't even need to know English. I mean, they don't need to know Hindi to be part of
I heard
Hindi
that even
film
the
industry.
Scripts are being written in, I heard that Bollywood scripts are no longer, in Hindi movies, are being written in English.
And then it's someone translates it? Or?
No, the whole thing is written in the Hindi words are written in English language. The script is English.
Wow.
So they don't write in Devanagari anymore.
That's also really bad, yeah. Oh. And then also this movie Anatomy of the Fall that we watched. It's about it's a really great movie, by the way. It's one of the best movies I've seen in 2023. And I love how language is used as the plot device to bring out the complexities of marriage and power structures in a marriage. Like I've never seen language being used so well, the language barriers being used so well in a movie.
I love that movie. And there was this scene where the mother is speaking in English to the child and the child replies in French. And I watched it for a few minutes and I said, who does that? And the next minute you looked at me and then I realized I used to speak to you in English, in Kannada, and you would reply to me in
It was
English.
the same thing.
Yeah, it was that situation there.
But now we didn't see what that would look like to a third party.
Yes,
Maybe
it looks so
looked
weird.
weird
Yeah.
and pathetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in the movie, the mother is a German whose native language is English, and English is like the language she's most comfortable with. And then and she knows a little bit of French. She understands French. She's living in France, and so her kid knows French really well because French is all around them in France, and his dad speaks in French.
Yeah, that
so
was a good
that's
movie.
that's why all that weirdness, because now the child only knows French very well, doesn't know English that well. Mother only knows English, and so they're just communicating like that.
Yes. So that is very unfortunate. I really hope that such situations don't occur. One thing I do know is that in schools all over the world now, international schools, the teachers are telling the parents to speak to the child in their own mother tongue. So they are being instructed that do not speak in English, just speak in your mother tongue to the child. And when the child comes to school, we'll speak to them we'll teach them in English. So that way they will learn all the languages.
This might be an unpopular opinion among the youth, but I still wanted to get your opinion on it. When I was growing up, I was really happy that I had both this, North and South connection. So you were South Indian, my dad being North Indian. I was able to get exposure to different languages and two different cultures, right? But I had friends whose parents had arranged marriages, so they married within the community, which I looked down upon. I was like, oh, like arranged marriage.
Look down on that.
I was like, no, my parents had a love marriage, and like,
God.
I don't know, that was some weird 4th grade, 5th grade thing, and they all married within the community, so because it's an arranged marriage, and they knew one language, they had one culture in their household. But now as I'm growing up, I realize that I only have 50% of your culture in me, of like Kannadiga culture, and then 50% of my dad's. So when I pass it on to the next generation, I'm going to be passing on like a mishmash of 2 different cultures, and not the 100% of your culture and 100% of my dad's culture. So even though I felt like, okay, we have greater diversity because I am the more diverse person here amongst all these people because I come from 2 different backgrounds, I feel like I actually lost out. We actually killed the diversity in a way by, I'm not saying you shouldn't have married my dad, but just as an example, if you married within your community and my dad married within his community, your children that you would have had would have known Kannada really well, and there would be no confusion in that household. And then in my dad's, if my dad married within the community, his, that culture would have been preserved. Your culture would have been preserved. I'm not saying that, I don't know, this is just one of the reasons I'm explaining.
No, so the thing is, yes, so if you are marrying within your community, there is disadvantage. If you're marrying in somebody who speaks the same language, that advantage is there. You're going to be preserving that language. Versus 2 people from different communities and different language backgrounds marrying. But I think if there was more conscious parenting, if we were more aware, your Appa and I, then I would have insisted that he speaks to you in Hindi only, no English, and then I would have also never switched from Kannada to English and found some other way to make you learn proper English. So it's also it's not just even though we came from different backgrounds, we could have actually managed it better. We could have ensured that you take 100% of both the languages rather. But yes, those who marry within the community, it's a little bit easier for them to preserve that diversity of the languages in the world by doing that. Yes.
It's a little bit counterintuitive, actually.
It's a little, yes,
that
that's true.
diversity is better preserved if you just maybe marry within your community. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just talking about one aspect of it,
Right.
like how do you preserve the diversity without killing it?
Correct.
And that may be possible through marrying within your community. But of course, that's just one observation I had as I grew up over time. I realized this. But obviously, I'm open to...
Your cousins could all speak very good Kannada and Hindi. They on one side, they all spoke good Hindi, and on the other side, they spoke good Kannada.
But I'm sure you could come up with examples of, people who have married outside of their community and their kids can speak both those languages really well.
So that is conscious parenting.
Conscious
where they have
parenting.
done conscious parenting.
Yeah. So I wouldn't blame just the fact that it wasn't like inter-community marriage or anything like that for my case. I think it's a special case because we also moved out of the country. And so there was a lot of, and maybe there was less awareness as well.
And plus, the English that was being taught to you in school was not the English I wanted you to speak. So,
exactly. But I think we should be thankful that at least in India, we have a diversity of languages. I find it quite ironic, but if you look at China's history, they have, since the 200 BC, since the Qin dynasty, the Qin, because they also have a Qing dynasty, but since the 200 BC Qin dynasty, there's been this massive effort to standardize Chinese. And all of that has come at the cost of a lot of indigenous languages being killed off and suppressed. Like the first Qin emperor in 200 BC, he literally suppressed 6 scripts. He told his prime minister to lease it, to like standardize it, and suppress so many other scripts in the process. And that's just been happening every subsequent dynasty. Even the Qing dynasty did something similar in 1644. They wanted to standardize Mandarin because they found it as this great effective tool of governance if you create an official language that everyone spoke in. And then of course with the People's Republic of China, they took that forward. They began to call the spoken form of Mandarin Putonghua, maybe butchering that name, but Putonghua is basically Mandarin, the spoken form of Mandarin, and that's being spoken everywhere. They don't want mother tongues like indigenous languages to be spoken. They just want this language to be the medium of instruction everywhere. So what I find ironic is that even though they've killed diversity and they've done this cultural genocide of sorts, they've still preserved the medium of instruction as their ethnic language. In India, we have all this diversity. We've preserved so many languages, but our main medium of instruction in a way is English. About a quarter of schools are English medium because we haven't been able to agree upon, which language should be the main medium of instruction. We haven't actively suppressed languages. So I find that very ironic.
That's true. But the good thing is that in the new education policy, NEP, what they have done is that they have made the mother tongue compulsory. So the medium of instruction in mother tongue would be, the medium of instruction would be in the mother tongue until grade 5, I think, and until grade 8 also can be done. And so that is really, really good. They will be learning in the mother tongue so that they will be preserved. And the other thing is that I also was reading that the higher education institutions, there is work going on to ensure that say engineering can be studied in the mother tongue. So somebody who wants to study engineering in Kannada, for example, that can be done. That is such a good move. When that works out in every language, it will ensure that students are not crippled because they don't know English, and then so they'll be better engineers because they'll learn it in their own language, and then later on, of course, they can learn English as a separate language. So that is a very welcome move. So whenever that happens, I'm going to be really happy. I've seen children struggling. They're coming from the villages, and then they're trying to, they want to become engineers and doctors, but all the material is in English. So they have to learn English, and so then they're going to take a very long time to get good in that subject because there's a language problem also. In IITs also that happens when students come from different language backgrounds. Yeah, so this is a good move. Advanced education in the mother tongue, along with the early education in the mother tongue.
Yeah, and we also saw that in the movie 12th Fail.
Oh, 12th Fail. Yeah, 12th Fail was such a good movie which highlighted the language problem, right?
Yeah.
So he came from the village. He was a Hindi speaking person, and he wanted to appear for that exam in Hindi. But then I think he didn't get good resources in that, so ultimately he tried to
move to English medium. Someone told him to move to English medium, even though maybe there was a smaller group of people who ended up making it. I don't actually remember.
No, but it was he had to ultimately, I think he appeared in English.
He
appeared for the exam in English. So he got confused between tourism and terrorism and all that, right?
He failed the whole exam.
He failed the exam because he thought he wrote on terrorism, but it was actually tourism that was written there. Some confusion. So that is really pathetic. It's still very much there. First of all, I don't like the fact that everybody was preparing for the civil services exam. That was the only thing, and they were like putting in attempt after attempt, year after year, trying for the same exam. That is totally the colonial culture that has come into India. And then there was this language problem also. So 12th Fail was a very good movie illustrating the challenges of not having the mother tongue as the medium of appearing for an exam, or not having good teachers teaching the different subjects in the mother tongue.
But what's I know you mentioned that NEP is going to do a better job of introducing mother tongue earlier on, but it's not actually going to ensure that you learn in your mother tongue, right?
No,
learning like math, science in your mother tongue.
I think until grade 5, grade 8, that's what they want to do.
Okay.
So that'll be a writing of a lot of textbooks that'll be needed, and all that has to be done.
But it's not like the English medium schools are going to go away.
Oh no, English medium schools will be there, and that is another thing. When the reason that English was imposed on us by the colonizers is part of the reason was that they wanted to impose it, but there was also a demand from the natives themselves. They wanted to study English because by that time we had become so impoverished that we had lost contact with all the great knowledge that was generated by Indians, by the gurus in India. We had lost touch with all that, and so the science was all coming from Europe. And to understand that, they needed English. So there was a demand from the natives for English, that they wanted English. So that's how, and of course the English people wanted to impose it themselves. So that's how English medium got so entrenched in our country that it is there till today. There are lots of people who will not want to study in the native languages. There'll be such people too. But
I wouldn't blame the natives who asked for that change either, because they didn't know. On like hindsight, it's easy for us to say that, oh, they should have not done that and it was wrong of them to ask for
once
English.
We got colonized, we had no choice, and so we had to, and we were impoverished. We had been invaded, and our educational system was dismantled, the higher education, and then the lower primary education was dismantled by the British. So these people felt that the only way they could advance was by learning English, our people. So that's how they also clamored for it, and that became a status symbol, knowing English. So, but that has caused great damage, because of that, all these problems have started. We have become alienated. We don't know our history. We don't know the great things that were achieved by our gurus in mathematics, astronomy, and we're just aping the West. And innovation has also been killed because we lost our mother tongue. I also feel innovation, when you are well grounded in your mother tongue, it might also lead to better innovation in everything. Or the jugaad that comes, jugaad I feel doesn't come from English educated people in India. It comes from the others.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in that time when they wanted to ensure that English was when the natives ended up asking for English, I mean, there are multiple ways in which you could have handled it. There's either you fight the system or you do well in the system that's been given to you, and that's a debate since, like, in so many revolutions, that's been something that always has two sides to it. Like even in America, there were two sides to it. Like, should we fight the system, like the blacks, and should they fight the system, or should they use this education system and become really good at it and then outshine, like the blacks outshining the whites in this system?
So the blacks had this debate.
Yeah, there were two factions. I remember studying that. There's no point in fighting them anymore, fighting what they're doing. Let's just get good at whatever they've given us and then overtake them in that. So I think because of that similar sentiment came up in India as well, and that's why English was chosen.
So that's why our first Prime Minister also was pushing English as a medium of instruction. And it took quite a bit of time for us, for the realization to dawn that has done a lot of damage to us. Right? And so now the mother tongue is being emphasized upon. So let's see if the damage can be reversed.
But then it's like everyone will be studying. So since there's so many mother tongues in India, so how will everyone be able to get their own mother tongue represented in their medium of instruction? I mean,
that's
just
fine,
understanding
right?
the logistical.
So they'll be learning, they'll be thinking in their mother tongue, but they'll also learn other languages. There'll always be other languages to learn as well. Since we know that we have capabilities to learn so many languages, so they'll learn their own language, preserve the knowledge in their own language, but they'll also learn the other languages. So there will be 2-3 languages that they have to learn, and English can also be one of those languages. Surely, everybody should know at least 4 or 5 languages. I would say everybody should learn 4 or 5 languages. It also opens doors for you. Like see, because I can speak Bengali and Hindi, so when I'm with Bengalis, I'm so comfortable. They will treat me as their own when I'm able to understand what they're talking, understand the inside jokes. Same thing with Hindi, same thing with Kannada. Imagine if I knew some more languages. Humans have this capacity to learn many languages. It'll open up doors for you.
What about Sanskrit? How do
And
you...
Sanskrit, I mean, of course.
I mean, of course, India, I don't think would ever agree on like Sanskrit being like the main mode of instruction, because
no, there
there's
was
also
a time, there was a window of opportunity when we became independent. There was this debate that whether what should be the language which will unite all of us, the link language. And Sanskrit had been proposed, but it was shot down by a very small number. So I feel that was a big mistake, because if we had all learned Sanskrit, all of us, and been good in Sanskrit, then it would have strengthened our ability to speak in other languages as well, because the very same words, vocabulary can also spill over to those languages, and so you'll have a very rich vocabulary.
But Sanskrit may have been would have been resisted by maybe the Tamil population, and so
No,
it's...
Tamil maybe, but not the others. And even in Tamil, of course, now if people go deep into it, they'll see that a lot of the literature is just reflecting what is in the Sanskrit literature. So it's not like some separate culture or separate civilization. It's the same thing. So Sanskrit as a language being taught at a younger age and in a very interesting way, it would have been really beneficial. I hope even today we can all make this effort.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it'll be that hard for us to like resurrect Sanskrit as such, because it's not dead. It's not a dead language. There are villages that continue to speak it, and there's so many Sanskrit teachers, and I mean,
it's growing. It's a growing movement.
Yeah.
We have to. Samskrita Bharati has done an amazing job to popularize spoken Sanskrit. So a lot of people are speaking. I've also gone to a camp with your father and thoroughly enjoyed it. And I want you also to come to the next camp, where Sanskrit is taught in a very fun way at different levels, and you will end up understanding your own mother tongue better because you know Sanskrit. So you will find that you will go there, go to these Sanskrit camps thinking you don't know any Sanskrit. And after 3 or 4 days, you will find that you are able to make a lot of sentences in Sanskrit, and some of that vocabulary will come from the mother tongue, from the Indian languages that you know, and that will make your language more scientific, more structured. Because Sanskrit is very scientific; it's very structured. So then that's how Sanskrit was the reason that linguistics became popular, right? So Sanskrit will also improve your way of thinking. It will become very organized.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of inspiration we can take from the story of Hebrew being resurrected. It was almost became like a dead language. It was not spoken because Jewish members of Jewish people ended up going to different countries and spoke the languages of their host countries. So Hebrew was just dying and had become a liturgic language. But then because of the Zionist movement and then the founding of the Israel, we see that there was this man named Eliezer ben Yehuda, and he put a lot of effort and work into ensuring that Hebrew comes back, making sure that people speak it at home, coining new terms in science, technology. So they did a lot of work to make it come back. And then, of course, when Israel was formed, they ensured that Hebrew was the medium of instruction. And now, the newer generation of students are fluent in that language. And now everything is in Hebrew there. They're making sure that, news channels are speaking in Hebrew. There's different cinema, different movies coming out in cinema in Hebrew. And so they're creating new literature in the language as well. So I think it's a great testament to these Jewish communities, the fact that they were able to revive this language. And I think what we should be inspired by this, we should understand that Sanskrit hasn't even reached that point where it's a relic. But if we don't do anything about it, maybe it might. So we just need to ensure that we are passing it on, because it has so much of our culture and our wisdom in it.
Yeah, Sanskrit, I feel that that has to be revived in a similar manner. We can take lessons from Hebrew, but I think a lot of organizations are doing a good job. You can learn, you can go to, I think, Vyoma. There's a website called Vyoma where I often go to refresh my memory on whatever I've learned in like Vibhakti in Sanskrit and all that. So once Sanskrit has another layer to it. When you learn Sanskrit, it's also the language of oneness, of sustainability, of yoga, Ayurveda, and all that. So you get connected to a big reservoir of knowledge when you learn Sanskrit. So I think more effort has to be put into that if we want to revive the mother tongues.
So just the last topic, I know that we've talked about what India should be doing to maybe revive mother tongues. What about diaspora Indians? what can they be doing?
Yeah, I think that what can be done is a more conscious parenting in which you make the mother tongue very interesting. So, in the form of games, a lot of games can be centered around teaching the mother tongue. Then there can be stories, of course, stories can be used. Then technology can be used to teach the mother tongue, right? So, there can be a lot of ways in which parents should know this, the end goal, that they have to make sure that the child speaks the mother tongue and enjoys it. It should not be a punishment, because once you make it like a punishment, the child is going to resist it. So it should be playful and fun, and then find lots of games. So in the Sanskrit Bharati camp, for example, we all played games in Sanskrit, running around, and there were terms that we had to learn before we played. Then there were quizzes in Sanskrit, and it was all a lot of fun, from Ramayana, Mahabharata. So all this Ramayana, Mahabharata, all this can be used to teach the mother tongue. So I think these are some ways. But technology, I think technology, we have not harnessed it fully to teach the mother tongue. There are lots of things probably we can do. Flashcards, of course, we have. Even the electronic flashcards can be used, right? If you are not able to make those flashcards, then use the electronic flashcards to make them learn words. Movies are one way that I made you understand Hindi better. So all those curated movies that are shown to children, so that they understand the mother tongue and at the same time know the culture. So Hindi, Kannada, Bengali, whatever. Like, I made you see so many Satyajit Ray movies, so you understood. Now you probably know a number of Bengali words as well. So that also, why are parents not using those tools to teach the mother tongue?
There's also the language curry app that you introduced to me.
Yeah, there is Sampadananda Mishra ji, who's very learned in Sanskrit. He started that language curry app. Have you used it?
I've used it. I was using it to learn Kannada, actually.
It has many languages.
It has
right?
many languages
Right.
in it. It's like a Duolingo for Indian languages.
Right.
I enjoyed using it,
Right.
and I even suggested it to one of my friends who wants to learn an Indian language because she's dating an Indian guy. So,
Right.
so yeah, that's been very, very helpful. And I mean, in general, I think AI is definitely going to change the way the fact that now we don't actually have to learn English.
Yes.
AI is making it much easier, because now I remember I watched Lex Friedman's a famous podcaster, and he was saying that all his videos are now automatically dubbed by AI into all these different languages, and so he doesn't have to manually go through with it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. And then because of all this technology, there was a TV series we saw, right, where that language translation, I think Succession, something.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh yes. Are you talking about the finale of Succession when Greg?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually, it's funny because it was part of the plot. So Succession is one of our favorite TV shows, or definitely one of my all-time favorite shows. And in the finale, so I think it's Mattson and Oscar, the Swedish guys, they're just like talking and they don't think anyone's understanding them. They're talking in Swedish. And Greg, who's usually not considered the smartest person, but he ends up going up and uses an AI translation, not AI, but just a translation app that hears what they're saying in Swedish and translates it into English and gets something very, very important to the plot. I won't like spoil that for anyone who hasn't watched Succession.
Yeah.
Go and watch Succession. It's such a good show. But he ends up getting this information, and it's funny how the language, that translation app played such a big role in the finale.
So he recorded what was being spoken.
No, he just like ended up clicking on the microphone. So the app, I'm guessing, heard what they were saying in Swedish and then translated it to English. So he read that, and then immediately that changed the whole direction of the plot at that point.
The first time I saw that something like that was in Russia. So I was I was sitting in the passenger seat, and I said something to the driver, and then the driver thrust his phone near my mouth, and I didn't know what he was doing. So he said, "Say what you said again." So I said it again, and then he heard it back in Russian, and then he answered in Russian, and then he played it back in English for me.
Yeah, but
So
now all of that's going to get easier with AI. Is all
Right.
like, subtitling is going to be easier to do. Basically, there's less like manual work we now need to put into translation because of AI.
Right.
So it's definitely going to change.
Already in United Nations, right? Everybody is speaking their own language, and then they're wearing those headphones and they're hearing it. in whichever language people are hearing that the speeches in whatever language they want. But there's a little bit of discomfort with that. I have used such headphones.
Yeah.
I don't find it very nice to. I really wish I knew that language and I didn't have to wear the headphone to hear the translation.
Yeah.
So I really feel that effort should be made to learn as many languages as possible. There should be no restriction. Nobody should be told that, oh, you can only learn 3 or 4. Learn as many as you can.
Yeah.
Because some people, it's possible. Some people are so proficient that they can learn, 20 languages or as many as they want. So let's make language learning a very exciting activity. I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much. This was a lot packed into one episode, and I really enjoyed this. I hope we can do a lot more. And to the audience, if you did enjoy this episode, I would encourage you to share and subscribe. I know, you know that inside out. Like, share, subscribe, comment below as well. I've watched so many YouTube videos, I didn't think I would also come here and have to say that, but would definitely definitely click on subscribe so that we can make more of these videos, because we have a lot of fun making them and we'd like more engagement. So thank you so much.